Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Vendetta Sports Media's T20 Cricket World Cup coverage. I'm Jerry Walker, and as always, alongside me is Jarrod Prosser. And the theme of this whole last couple of days has been the rain. It's really played a little bit of havoc for at least two matches, especially delayed a little bit of the England-Ireland match. But Jarrod, just a brief overview. What's your thoughts on these last 3 days of action since we decided to move our episode back a day?
Yeah, and look, I actually did have someone DM me and say, "Hey, you guys, have you put up an episode?" Which was good because people are watching.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was purely because the Australia-Sri Lanka game was in Perth, and I'm on the east coast of Australia. So by the time that match ended, it would have been 2 a.m. my time when we started potting, and yeah, quite frankly, I just couldn't bring myself to do that. I would have had my eyes hanging out of my head. So we decided to put it off for a day. We have had some really good matches. As you mentioned, we've had the weather wash out a couple of matches. One, we got a little bit of action at least, but one, they're without a ball being bowled. And as you said, it had an effect, quite a substantial effect on the England-Ireland game. But the two matches that we did get, one of them in particular was a genuine classic. Probably not, well, definitely not on the level of the Pakistan-India game that we had a few days ago, which, again, I actually went back and watched an extended package of that one just to see it in the cold light of day, knowing what the end result was going to be. And it was still just as exciting. It was just an incredible match.
I did the same thing. I went back and watched the entire match through because I was asleep during that as it started at 3 a.m. my time. And it was just, even knowing what's going to happen, it just makes it even crazier to watch, seeing all the slight things that could have changed it and could have won it for Pakistan maybe, but that wasn't to be the case. But we'll get started with Group 2 action, the Netherlands and Bangladesh. Bangladesh won by 9 runs, 144 for 8 to 135. And at least for their inning, the opening batters kind of set the tone a little well for them.
Yeah, look, with Bangladesh, if you can get rid of Shakib Al Hassan and Lytton Das, if you can get rid of them cheaply, you generally hold Bangladesh to a low total. And it's a credit to the Bangladeshi batting lineup that they put together a reasonable total with those two stars contributing 16 between them. And it was the young lefty Afif Hossain who led the way for them, a really good 38 off 27 in not easy conditions. And he had good support. Najmul Hussain Santo, 25 runs up the top of the order, and Musaddeq Hussain, 20 not out, a nice little cameo off 12 balls at the end there. But it as much as it was a good little fight back by Bangladesh when their big two didn't fire, I was quite impressed by the Dutch bowling. Good lines. They varied their lengths really effectively. It was a really a disciplined performance from Holland, which you generally don't associate. Those you might get someone who just out of the box takes 3 or 4 wickets, but you generally don't associate those an entire bowling unit bowling tight and disciplined for 20 overs from the smaller cricketing nation. So it was a really good effort from the Dutch in the field, I thought.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, Basta lead got 2 wickets, both in that 18th over that kind of could have let the lead get even more out of hand and made it even harder for the Netherlands to chase. And I mean, Paul van Meekeren, he got 2 wickets.
He was very good.
He got 2 wickets as well, including a very important first wicket when it looked like the Bangladeshi openers were going to run rampant. It was already 43. I think there was 43 for 1 in the 5th over. Might have even been the 6th over when he got that first wicket. And that was kind of a big moment for them. But yeah, like you said, the bowling all around did a surprisingly good job for the Dutch.
And I was interested to see Colin Ackerman open the bowling, and he only bowled the 1 over. So it was clearly a shock tactic. Well, I shouldn't say open the bowling. He bowled from the other end, the 2nd over. It was clearly a shock tactic because Ackerman's not exactly a noted bowler. But he only conceded 4 runs. I thought he probably earned himself a 2nd over. But at the same time, holding Bangladesh to 144 was a pretty good effort. So clearly whatever tactics Holland had coming into this one, it worked. The issue though, when the Dutch went in, a little bit of a disaster. Vikram Singh falling very first ball of the innings, little nick through to first slip, and Bastilleter nicked one through to the keeper the next ball. So 2 balls in, you're none for 2 wickets down for none. They're like just a horrible start for Holland.
Oh, yeah, awful. And I mean, Bastilleter has been one of their better players so far in this World Cup, especially on the batting side. And even Max O'Dowd, who's been kind of a star for them batting, he was out after 8 balls for only 8 runs. So that was just a tough start for the Netherlands batting. But then Colin Ackerman kind of put the team on his back a little bit. 62 from 48, 6 boundaries, 2 sixes. He kind of made it a match, much more than we were kind of expecting it to be, considering the start of that batting inning for the Netherlands.
Yeah, when you lose 2 for zip and then you lose arguably your best batsman, early on in O'Dowd, this really could have gone pear-shaped for the Dutch. But Ackerman played wonderfully. It was a lone hand, admittedly. Scott Edwards had 16. He was the only other player to hit double figures. But look, he at least made a match of this. Holland were always fighting an uphill battle after that first over, but Ackerman at least made it interesting. From the bowling side of it, we'd be remiss not to mention Tuscan Ahmed, who got those opening 2 wickets. He ended up with 4 for 25 off his 4, and obviously broke the game open. But he also took out Ackerman, so easily a career best performance for the Quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, through 4 balls before he took out Ackerman, he took out Shariz Ahmad. And that was, so he got 2 wickets in that over. And he just played a great match. Only allowed 25 in his 4 overs of work. Yeah. Gave up 4 boundaries, no sixes. But he really was kind of the star of that Bangladeshi bowling side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. You look at the figures and go, geez, he's had a good day. But the figures almost, like, they almost undersell what he did. He broke the game open. He got rid of the one man who could have really saved the Dutch in this match. He was clearly the pick of the bowlers from both sides and a pretty deserving man of the match for mine.
I mean, something else I want to mention on the Netherlands batting inning, I wasn't sure who was bowling, but Max O'Dowd and Tom Cooper both were run out in a 3-ball stretch in that 4th over, which kind of stopped them in their tracks. So they were 4 for 15 at that point.
Yeah. And one of those, I can't recall which one it was, Jerry, but one of those was just a bad run out. Like really bad communication. I can't think of which one it was off the top of my head, which is bad form for me. But yeah, one of them was just like, face palm bad.
Yeah, it's just early stuff that you learn when you start playing cricket, when not to run. And that was just, they tried to get
just communicate, talk to your partner. Talk to your partner. Let them know what's happening, It's just a bad mix-ups.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the India-Pakistan. Virat Kohli almost got run out early in it because he started running and his teammate just said, go back. And he looked around, like you could see on the zoomed in, his eyes suddenly just grows like, oh, shit. I might be in a bad position right here.
But it's the classic, you knock it into the infield, you knock it through the covers or whatever, and you get there, yes, no, maybe, yes. And, people are stopping, starting. And 22 yards doesn't seem like a long distance, but when you have to start and stop, it suddenly becomes a very, very long way to go.
Yeah. As far as the Bangladeshi bowling, I also want to mention Hassan Mahmood, who 2 wickets, gave up 15 runs in 4 overs of work. He had a pretty strong outing as well.
Yeah, no, he was solid. Like, he unspectacular. Like, he certainly wasn't like Tuscan, but yeah, I mean, he bowled well. He was tough to get away. Got a little bit of a reward with a couple of wickets as well.
Yeah, that's kind of all that was going on in that match. Next up for the Netherlands is India. Next up for Bangladesh, South Africa. So 2 very difficult matches for those 2 teams. But we'll move on to one of those teams who will be playing Bangladesh, South Africa and Zimbabwe. Ultimately ruled a no contest in Hobart with the rain. Zimbabwe finished 79 for 5 in their 9 overs. They changed it to a 9 over match. And then even South Africa's inning, they went 51 for no wickets, but they were only able to play 3 of their extend or change to 7 overs.
Yeah, and it needs to be pointed out to people that might not know this, that you need to have 5 overs per side to make it a fair contest and an official contest. So South Africa in this case just didn't get through the overs, but yeah, but it is worth noting Quinton de Kock, 47 not out of 18. Like, he seemed determined. He knew the rains were coming, and it was almost like a nothing to lose. Let's throw caution to the wind, and he just swung at everything. 18 balls he faced, 8 fours and 1 6. Half of his balls found the boundary. Like, it was an incredible cameo.
It really was, and I mean, got to feel a little bad for South Africa, because they were definitely running away with this, and had they played even 5 overs, they may have reached that 80 mark that they needed to win, but just wasn't to be. And
yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, look, they still get a point out of it. A no contest, an abandoned match is ruled as a draw, as a tie. So they still get their point out of it. But yeah, you'd think in normal circumstance, all other things being equal, South Africa probably would have won that match.
And I feel like that would have been a big extra point to have with India and Pakistan in there. And kind of Pakistan, we know, lost to India the other day, but this would have given Sri Lanka another win, or a win, and it kind of would have pushed them into that second place position in Group 2.
Yeah, and at least gives them a start, because Zimbabwe are a dangerous opponent. They're not an easy team by any means, but they're not one of the bigger teams. So to get rid of that potential banana peel would have been a relief for South Africa. But look, that's the nature of cricket. It's an outdoor sport. It's not played in the rain, and sometimes weather intervenes.
It does indeed. We'll move on to Group 1, and your home team finally got back to winning ways. Australia beat Sri Lanka by 7 wickets, 158 for 3 to 157 for 6. And the thing that stood out to me the most, like, about this, at least the scoring wise, is it helped the Australian net run rate significantly.
It had to. Like, anything less than literally shooting ourselves in the foot would have helped our run rate after that New Zealand disaster. But yes, this one definitely did help the run rate.
What are your just thoughts on this match as Australia? Because you were saying Australia was going to make some changes, and
yeah, well, the only change that they did make was an enforced one. Adam Zampa, who is a specialist T20 spinner, or specialist short form spinner, came down with COVID. So they brought in Ashton Agar, who is a good, solid T20 player, certainly a better batsman than Zampa. But as a bowler, he's good, he's solid, and he bowled well in this match, but he just can't hold a candle to Zampa. Zampa is a wicket taker in T20 cricket. So with him being out, Zampa being out, and no changes to the pace attack, I've got to admit I was worried. And ultimately, I think my concerns did come to bear. It was a good start for Australia. Mendes was dismissed cheaply, and he's the danger man for the Sri Lankans. But a really good second wicket partnership between Nissanka and De Silva, a 69-run partnership for them. It just righted things a bit. From there, though, Sri Lanka did lose regular wickets. They just couldn't build a partnership, and that stymied the run rate a little bit until those last few overs. Charlotte Asaranka, 31 runs in the last 2 overs for Sri Lanka, and most of that came from Asaranka's bat. He ends up with 38 not out. Nissanka, who opened the innings, had 40. A solid innings, but a slow-moving innings for Nissanka. I thought Australia bowled well generally and fielded superbly in this one. But again, Australia just lacks a genuine closing bowler, like a specialist death bowler in T20 cricket. And that again came to the fore because, Australia had Sri Lanka on the ropes, and the Sri Lankans just gained most of that ground back in those last 3-4 overs. And I really think that someone needs to go. There's talk for Patrick Cummins to go. I'd still probably go for Hazelwood out of the side. He's a steadier bowler than Cummins, but Cummins can win you a match. I do like the call for Kane Richardson for him to come in. Australia just needs something different at the death. Zampa's a brilliant bowler at the death. Again, he wasn't there. I just think there's something needs to change in the Australian bowling attack. It's all just a little bit too similar.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I mean, you said they kind of didn't close this out very well. Sri Lanka was 111 for 5 wickets after the 16th over, ended with 157. That just shows right there that they kind of didn't really slow them down too much in those final 4 overs, and Sri Lanka got 46 runs in that.
Yeah, exactly. 10 and over at the death is not good. It's just straight out not good. I mean, of course, batsmen are going to be hitting out a little bit more, especially when you've got wickets in hand like Sri Lanka did, but Australia didn't bowl particularly well. Overall, though, it was a fairly balanced effort. Stark, Hazelwood and Agar all bowled with pretty good economy. The 5 wickets or the 6 wickets were shared between 5 bowlers and a run out. So nobody was really too threatening, but everybody bowled pretty well for the Australians.
Absolutely.
Until those last 4 overs.
Oh, yeah. And now moving on to the Australian inning. We got to start with Aaron Finch, went 31 for 42, carried his bat through the entire match.
It was painful, though.
It was not
a horrible innings to watch
for him. But we got to talk about the star of that inning, Marcus Stoinis. 59 runs from 18 balls. I believe that was the fastest half century in Australian T20 history.
Yeah. 4 boundaries. Yeah, no, he was magnificent in this one.
Yeah, 4 boundaries, 6 sixes. You want to just talk on his performance for Australia in this?
Oh, electrifying. And look, Australia, it was a bad start for South Africa with this one. Fernando, the opening bowler, left the field with injury, couldn't get through his first over. But the Sri Lankans did tie down Warner until he fell to a really good catch in the infield by Sri Lanka. Yep. Mitch Marsh struggled before falling as well. As you mentioned, Aaron Finch did carry his bat in this one, and he desperately needed the runs. But, oh, God, Jerry, he rode his luck. He should have been out 4 or 5 times. I'm still scratching my head as to how he managed to keep his wicket. he looked so scratchy out there. It's 41 of the luckiest runs he will ever score. Sadly, he just doesn't look up to international cricket. And I know he's retiring at the end of the tournament, but to see him go out like this is really disappointing because he's had a stellar career. But that brings us on to the men of the moment. Glenn Maxwell, he's an enigma wrapped in a riddle, but he looked like he was going to take it home for Australia. He looked in fine form before he went out to a really good outfield catch. But that brought Stoinis to the crease, and he was incredible. You mentioned the 4 fours, 6 sixes, but they weren't even that doesn't tell the story. The 6 sixes were all just enormous sixes, and Stoinis is he's an effervescent personality. He's a really big personality, but he's sitting there like almost shaking with emotion, like pumping the fist and screaming, almost like primal screams. And you don't see that from him too often. Usually he's a really, as much as he's a big personality, he's a happy guy. To see him this emotional was something different. The innings itself, though, it reminded me of an innings he had for the Melbourne Stars in the Big Bash League, the Australian National League. The Stars is the team that I follow, and a couple of years ago playing the Sydney Sixers, he put on he had 147 not out in a T20 game. It's the most incredible, big hitting batting performance I've ever seen. And I was there. I was at the ground that night. It was freaking insane. And
what was the atmosphere like for that? Was everyone just going insane because of that?
Oh, it was, but at the same time, we were almost laughing in disbelief. We're just sitting here going, "What are we witnessing? We've never seen anything like this. This was just incredible." This was a short form. This was like a concentrated dose of that innings. Obviously, it's a much shorter innings. The 147 was off about, I think, 60 balls, something like that. So similar sort of scoring rate. But yeah, it was very much like that innings where he he could have picked up a pool cue and he would have managed to hit the ball for 6. He was seeing it that well. Just a remarkable innings. And it was timely as well. You mentioned the net run rate, but and the speed of which he scored obviously helps the net run rate. But even just winning the match, losing this would have been a disaster for Australia. And because Australia was scoring so slowly, there was no guarantee that he was going to be able to, either that Australia was going to win this match. It was looking quite dicey. So he came in and just stole this game away from Sri Lanka. And, maybe that's the thing that ignites a fire under Australia. I don't know. It remains to be seen. But if Australia do go on to have a really strong performance in this tournament, we can probably look back to that as the moment that, that we, I shouldn't say we, even I am Australian, that it's the moment that Australia found their groove. They got their mojo back.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a big win, especially after that loss to New Zealand. And now looking ahead at their next match against an England team that has looked very disappointing from our expectations. But one more thing on this Sri Lanka-Australia match that I want to mention is the bowling of Hasaranga. We've seen him bowl pretty outstandingly this T20 World Cup so far. I think he's the leading wicket taker, but 53 runs given up, no wickets in 3 overs. I think
I felt sorry for him. Like, overall, the Sri Lankans bowled really tight and really disciplined, but Hasaranga, he generally comes on later in innings to try and clean up middle orders and tails. He came in right as Stoinis came to the crease. Yeah. So he felt the full force of the hurricane, unfortunately. It really was an outlier. I think it will be an outlier of an innings for Hasaranga. He just couldn't have timed his entry into the bowling attack any worse.
No, it's just bad timing. But we'll move on to England and Ireland, which ended up taking a little while to start due to the rain. But Ireland ended up winning by 5 runs with the D&L method, 157 to 105 for 5 for England. So what you side there? What are your thoughts on that?
It's just, look, I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a statistician. I don't know the answer. But every time the Duckworth-Lewis method comes into play, it always feels like one team's getting screwed. And I really do feel like, it always seems to be the side that's batting first seem to get the benefit. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my perception. And again, I'm not a mathematical genius. I don't know how to solve this problem, but Duckworth-Lewis has been a little bit of a bane on cricket's existence for as long as it's been around. It's been around for decades. I'm sure there's a better way. I just don't know what it is. But every time there's a rain-affected match, particularly in T20 where there's not a lot of time to recover, it always just feels a little bit disappointing, a little bit dirty, the win.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because this is a big moment for Ireland.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge win for Ireland. And really it comes on the back of Andy Balbirnie, their captain. 62 from 47, 5 boundaries, 2 sixes. He was, apart from Lawson Tucker, who had 34 runs, it was really just Balbirnie carrying the team and making the majority of those runs.
Yeah. Paul Sterling looked up for it at the top of the innings. He came out blazing hot, but fell pretty cheaply in the end, which is a shame. It looked like he was going to be on one. But yeah, Balbirnie, he and Tucker put on a what was it? I think 82-run partnership for the second wicket, and that really took the game away from the English. They're bowlers who, I mentioned after when we recapped the Afghanistan game, Jerry, that the English batting lineup is phenomenal, but I was a little worried about their bowling. It's good, but not awesome. But I was really impressed with their bowling against Afghanistan. This time around, I wasn't all that impressed at all. I thought Liam Livingstone was good, 3 for 17 off 3. Mark Wood is a wicket taker. He took another 3, but he was pretty expensive, as was Sam Curran. Stokes and Adil Rashid were, they didn't look all that threatening, but they were economical. Yeah, I just didn't feel like the English handled the conditions as well as they maybe would have liked.
And I mean, just mention Chris Wokes, no wickets, 3 overs, 41 runs allowed, the most runs by any English bowling. It was just awful to watch him bowl this morning.
Yeah. And look, Chris Wokes has a rip in him. He does have these sorts of innings in him where he just seems to put the ball in the slot with no movement, no swing, no seam, and gets tonked to all parts of the ground. This was one of those days for Chris Wokes. He's the sort of guy that when he's on, he's almost unplayable, but when he's off, he's a park bowler. Like he's a Sunday league bowler.
Absolutely, and I mean, moving to the England innings, it got off to just an awful start. Joss Butler out after 2 balls for no runs. Alex Hales got out in the 3rd over with only 7 runs from 5. It just England batting never looked to click. And I know we mentioned Ben Stokes last episode. We talked about England, and he didn't have a great match. We thought he would kind of bounce back, but he was out after 6 runs after 8 balls, which.
Yeah, look, I generally think with Stokes, as much as he's had some heroic batting performances, he's almost like the modern-day version of Freddie Flintoff for England, where, yes, he can play some brilliant innings, but ultimately he's a bowler who bats. He's not a genuine all-rounder. So, you know, his main job is with the ball, and if he gives you stuff with the bat, it's a bonus. A word for Josh Little, the Irish quick. I haven't been all that impressed by him, to be honest, but he was excellent today. As you mentioned, he got both of the openers, Butler and Hales, who are extremely dangerous batsmen. He really set the Irish off on their way. And this was going to be a rain-affected match. So England really needed to do 2 things, and that was score quickly and not lose wickets, because they didn't know when the rain was going to come. So losing 2 wickets early, that goes against you in the Duckworth-Lewis model. And it slowed down the run rate, and that goes against you in the Duckworth-Lewis model. Dawood Malan came in and he steadied the ship, 35 off 37, not a particularly fast-scoring innings. And in normal circumstances, that would be fine with that really deep English batting lineup, and not a good total, but not a particularly taxing total to chase down. Just steadying the ship and then letting Stokes and Moeen Ali and Livingston and all these guys come in, they could, up the pace and take it through. But in a match where the rain was clearly going to be a factor, Milan probably need to put the foot on the gas a bit more as well.
He did indeed. But I mean, we saw Moeen Ali put his foot on the gas, and he looked he looked great in his couple overs. 24 from 12, 3 boundaries, 1 6. But it was kind of just too little too late. The rain came into play and stopped the match after 14.3 or 14 overs, 3 balls. And we didn't really get to see the hero of the last match, or more, not the hero, the savior for England in the batting inning, Liam Livingston. He only faced 2 balls, got 1 run. But him and Moeen Ali looked like they could potentially have turned this around and maybe chased down that 157.
Yeah.
But the rain had other ideas and it wasn't to be.
Well, at one stage, England needed 53 from 33, and I looked at that and thought, this is this is on a knife's edge, and it was really going to come down to the wire. And even if it had gone England's way, I may have felt a bit dirty on this one, because we were going to get a grandstand finish. But Duckworth-Lewis, the mathematical model came out and said, at the point that the match was abandoned, the Irish are ahead by 5 runs. So it's probably not the way the Irish would have liked to have gotten a World Cup win over England, but they will sure as shit take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a win's a win for anyone. And I feel like this was a match England kind of needed to win, considering they play Australia next. But we'll talk about the last match of the last 3 days, last match of Group 1 this weekend, or these last few days, which we can just cover this quick. Then we'll take a little break and get into our previews and where we stand right now. But New Zealand, Afghanistan, no balls played in Melbourne. Rain just delayed that match completely. So
no abandoned without a ball being bowled, unfortunately, which will hurt the Kiwis, because they, after beating Australia, they would have felt like they had a chance to put a little bit of a gap between them, and especially with England losing, they might have felt they had a chance to put some distance between them and the rest of the group. But, alas, it's not to be. The rain came down, and as you mentioned, is expected to come down. We were talking before we were recording, because I live about an hour west of Melbourne, that the rain band from a couple of weeks ago, which flooded a lot of Victoria, was a little bit north of me, not much, only about a half hour's drive north of me, and it looks like this next rain band is the same. So as much as I'm not in the flood zones, we've still got an inch or two of water around our yards. So even the places that aren't getting absolutely bombarded are still really, really wet. So unfortunately, Victoria as a whole is going to be, any match at the MCG is potentially a washout at this stage, at least for the next, 3 days, 4 days, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's some big matches being played there, but we're running low on time on this. We'll be right back after a short break. See you guys in a bit. We're back, guys. Sorry about that break, but we're ready to get into where we stand right now. 2 matches played for every team in Group 1, and currently New Zealand sit atop of that group with 3 points, followed by Sri Lanka, England, Ireland, Australia, all with 2. But in that order is where they stand right now. So as of the second, Sri Lanka is at second place position and would be going on to the semifinals. Then Afghanistan rounds out that group with 1 point from that draw. But what do you think of this group right now? Is this kind of what you were expecting to see? A very group?
Not necessarily. I certainly expected. Honestly, I expected England to be on top, tied with whoever won out of Australia, New Zealand. So to see England with a loss, to see Australia with a loss isn't a shock considering it came to New Zealand. But to see England with a loss this early is a little bit of a surprise. New Zealand clearly in the box seat. They should, in normal circumstance, they'd probably be on 4 points, not 3, and have a better net run rate. But as it is, their net run rate, it is like Sri Lanka in second have got a plus 0.45. New Zealand are plus 4.45, like literally 10 times better. Yeah. So New Zealand are clearly in the box seat to take this group. But second place is very, very even. You never know what can happen with Afghanistan. Their bowling lineup is they've got some genuine match winners in there. Australia in 5th will get better. Ireland are probably, if they can win one more game, they will be thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely.
And England and Sri Lanka are still in there as well. So this is a really tight group.
It really is. I mean, Ireland, they'll be happy beating England, and anything else is kind of that bonus for them.
They've done their job. If they go home without any other wins in the tournament, they've taken out England. And they will live off that forever.
Something I wanted to mention a little earlier that I forgot about, but we remembered, is our England-Ireland match is very similar to that 2010 World Cup match in the West Indies in the T20 World Cup, where that was delayed because of rain or canceled because of rain and ruled a no contest. But Ireland looked like England was done with 120 runs. Ireland could have chased that, but it wasn't to be because of the rain. It's very similar to this one.
That's a really good point. I'd actually forgotten about that match. That's a really good point. And you're right. Even though this did come down to Duckworth-Lewis, the Irish might feel like they've gotten a little bit back here. But the cricket gods have balanced things up a little bit.
Yeah, it's all evened out. But on to Group 2, everyone's played 1 match. Bangladesh sits atop the group with 2 points. India's right behind them with 2 points as well. Net run rate difference, Bangladesh 0.450, India 0.050. So 0.4 better for Bangladesh. But after that, South Africa, Zimbabwe, they both split a point each. And then Pakistan, Netherlands sit at the bottom 2 with no points. Is this kind of what we were expecting? What do you think of this group so far?
Yeah, tough to say. I mean, they've only played 1 game each. And in the case of South Africa, Zimbabwe got rained out. Netherlands, bottom of the group. That's about right, really. But yeah, I mean, to say Pakistan in 5th, are they in trouble? They almost won that match. Yeah, and in that case, you'd be saying they're India in trouble. So realistically, it's pretty evenly poised. Again, I would say that the Dutch will be holding up the table on this one. But South Africa probably would have thought they could get off on on the board here with 2 points. As it is, they've got one. At least it's something. But we'll know more in a few days once all of these sides are through their second matches.
Yeah, we'll really know that after tomorrow, as Bangladesh plays South Africa Wednesday night in the US, Thursday morning, afternoon in Australia. But what are your thoughts on that match?
Yeah, look, South Africa will be primed and ready to go for this one. They, as we mentioned, Quentin de Kock, he looked in red hot form.
Oh yeah.
So I think South Africa will be ready to take this one. I think they will outclass Bangladesh, who are a good side. You know, their batting performance will be better than what it was last time out against the Netherlands. But I think South Africa, I'll try English, has got enough to see them off.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think South Africa will get that one done. But the other two matches, Thursday morning, early morning in the US, Thursday afternoon, evening in Australia, India versus the Netherlands, Pakistan versus Zimbabwe. I think we both are pretty convinced that India should run away from the Netherlands relatively easy. And I would say as good as Zimbabwe's been, I think Pakistan is going to have a little bit of an itch on their back and try and get back in that one.
There's going to be no grey area with the Pakistan-Zimbabwe match. The Pakis will either come out and beat the bejesus out of the Zimbabweans, or we will get one of those, A+ unintentional comedy performances from the Pakistanis, and the Zimbabweans will get a famous win. I genuinely don't know which way it'll go. Your mind says that Pakistan, they're just a really, really talented cricketing nation, and they've got a very talented squad here. Your mind says they should take it, but as I've said ad nauseum, the Pakistan as a cricketing nation is capable of some unusual things. So I'll say Pakistan, Jerry, but don't be shocked if we get to recording on Friday night, my time, and we're talking about a famous Zimbabwean upset.
No, absolutely. Pakistan's very much a hit or miss team, especially in this T20s. And I agree with you. I think it'll be Pakistan, but it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone if Zimbabwe pulled this through. Then we'll move to, I believe, Friday morning in the US, Friday afternoon in the Australia, Afghanistan versus Ireland, England versus Australia. As we've mentioned, both of those matches will be in Melbourne. And as we mentioned, the rain in Melbourne is set to be very, very much in force those next couple days. So do you think we'll even get these matches, or do you think we'll see a couple no contests here?
This is bad podcasting, but I'm literally opening up my phone to check the weather app right now, Jerry. So I'm going to take a quick look and see what Friday looks like.
I believe it's like a 90 or 80% chance of rain, but
it doesn't look great. It looks pretty rough. I'll go out on a limb and say we're going to get two no results here. But let's assume that
say they do get.
Let's assume that the ICC unleash their weather machine and we get perfect weather. I think that Afghanistan will romp it in against Ireland. I think there will be a massive emotional come down for the Irish.
Yeah.
Their final, their T20 World Cup final was playing England, and they've gotten that job done. I think they will. I honestly think Ireland will be super, super flat in this one, and the Afghanis will just roll over them. As for Australia, England, England traditionally don't play the MCG that well. It's miles bigger than any ground in England. And a lot of the shots that the English play that would, at Trent Bridge or Old Trafford, it would be a 6. It gets caught like 5 metres in from the boundary in Australia. Or at the MCG, I should say. So, Australia, as much as it's a home ground advantage because it's Australia, it's a home ground advantage because it's the MCG. Having said that, England will want to bounce back, and I'm a little concerned that Australia won't be complacent, but as far as their performances go, but they'll be complacent in the makeup of their team. The Australians have to consider that Sri Lanka did drop catches in the Australian innings, and that it ultimately took like a an all-time cameo from Marcus Stoinis to get them over the line.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be able to rely on Stoinis going for another 50-odd off 18 balls. And they're certainly not going to be able to rely on the English, who are a very good fielding side, in dropping a bunch of catches. So this really hurts me to say, and I'm going to slap myself once we're off air, but I'm going to say that if the match goes ahead, England might just win this one.
See, I'm thinking kind of the opposite way. As much as I want England to win, I feel like the batting, you would think it's going to get going at some point. It just hasn't shown any signs of life so far for England. And I think Australia might have a little bit more momentum after their win against Sri Lanka. I would have Australia winning that one, but as well as Afghanistan using their strong bowling. I think Ireland, like you said, they're going to be on a little hangover from that win against England last night.
They might be on a literal hangover.
Yeah, that as well. The Irish know how to drink, and they enjoy, enjoy a pint or two or 4 or 5 maybe. But I think Afghanistan's bowling will be enough to get through there. But any other words on these matches or anything we've seen so far in the last couple of days?
Pray for sunshine. Just pray for sunshine. And look, the matches on Thursday, Pakistan, Zimbabwe's over in Perth. I don't think there's any rain forecast there, but Netherlands, India as well. That's in Sydney. And, it's about, 800 or 900 K north of Melbourne. This rain band is covering all the way up to Sydney. So there's potential here that, and South Africa, Bangladesh, and Sydney as well. So we're talking about 5 matches by the time we next pod. There is a real chance that we could have a 10-minute pod here because 4 of them will be rained out. So I think we've got some good contest, but please, pray to whatever gods you believe in for good weather on the eastern seaboard of Australia.
Yeah, I will say from looking at the weather earlier in Sydney, it looks like, fingers crossed, it's going to be sunny, 75 Fahrenheit there. So it should be good, at least for those 2 matches, but you never know what's going to happen. You can't trust the weathermen to save your life. So, but with that concludes our most recent episode, recapping days 9, 10, and 11 of the Cricket World Cup for Vendetta Sports Media. Check out all of our stuff that we've done. You can reach Jarrod on Twitter at hey_it's_JP. You can reach me at JerryF007. We want to hear your thoughts on the Cricket World Cup so far. What teams have surprised you? What teams have maybe disappointed you a little? Do you think we're crazy thinking that all this stuff's going to get rained out in Melbourne? Probably not, but who knows? And we want to hear all your stuff. So check out all of our other stories, our Vendetta, our other podcasts on our YouTube channel. Look at our Twitter. We post everything on there. Have a good one. Jarrod, thank you as always. And we'll see you guys later.